Okay, welcome to the second program meeting of the year of the Glen Haven Historical Society. Last month I forgot to ask you to pledge allegiance to the flag. So if you would stand if you're able, and we'll pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. Sue Rudolph is going to sell some things.
We're always promoting things that'll help the society. So, if you've never bought a Cat's Meow, this is the school, and on the back it tells about it. And there's always a cat in the Cat's Meow. It's right down here. And we have them for sale. They're $15 and you can get them right out there. We also have fabulous postcards that have been reproduced in color. One of the Glen Haven Hotel in the original. One of the people in the stagecoach at the Glen Haven Hotel leaving after they have had a nice stay there. Whoops, that's a duplicate. This is the docks at Glen Haven with a good view of Fairhaven over here. Then there's one leaving the hotel in the carriage, and then one of Ceylon, which is this Shady Beach or no?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the Shady Beach Marina, if you remember it back in the day. It's still there, but it's okay. And then the last thing I'm going to hawk here is the Re-Echo, which is the history of our school, and we have these for sale for $15, and this is a wonderful, wonderful book. We interviewed a lot of the students that went here, and their impressions of the school are in here, and it's wonderful. You need one. Thank you. Oh, maps. I'm sorry. We have the what do you call them?
Depth maps.
Depth maps in blue and in beige, and we have them for sale. If you want one, you can look at them right out in the foyer, and we will get you a map. Thank you.
Chip, who was the guy who took these photos?
If you hadn't asked me,
It was something like Rumford.
that's Sue.
Sue,
Yeah.
do you know who took those photos?
Which photo?
These.
Well, they're different ones.
Well, it's from a souvenir photo book.
Oh, that's right. That's
Yeah,
is that
and,
the book you have?
Yeah, they were shot about, I think, 1898.
And he hand-assembled the books.
He hand-assembled the books, so if you have a book, it's hand-assembled. He pasted the photos on the page, and then he made a book.
And
he
hand-labeled.
sold. We don't know how many he sold, but what's interesting is the carriage at the top of the hill here. That's actually John Briggs, who later went on to sell Cadillacs in Homer. If any of you are local, that's actually John driving that carriage.
What was that? The funeral?
Right there.
Was that the funeral carriage?
No,
I just
that's another Briggs.
another bridge. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's it. And you can see the lake. And the neat thing about this one is, this was when you used to come down the dirt road, and you could see the whole lake as you were coming down the hill. Now there's trees there, and we get just a little peek. So that's really a neat card.
Okay, the next activity is book group, which is next Wednesday, and that's Small Great Things. And I'm not sure, does anyone know who's leading the discussion?
Marilyn Levine.
Okay, Marilyn Levine will be leading the discussion. And then it's the annual program. Yes. No, another book group. Dead Letters, and that's written by an author from Ithaca, I think. Is that right? No? Yes, Alice? Yes, I think that's so. And then the annual meeting. But we have an important program. Dr. Marjorie Blanchard has earned a reputation worldwide as a compelling motivational speaker, an accomplished management consultant and trainer, a best-selling author, and an entrepreneur. She is the co-recipient with her husband, Dr. Kenneth H. Blanchard, of the Entrepreneur of the Year Award from Cornell University. Margie is a co-author of The 1 Minute Manager Balances Work and Life, Working Well, Managing for Health and High Performance, and Leading at a Higher Level. She is well versed in a variety of topics, and she often speaks on the topics of leadership, balance, managing change, aging parents, and life planning. As co-founder of the Ken Blanchard Company, Margie has worked with Ken developing the company into one of the premier management consulting and training companies in the world. She served as president from 1987 to 1997, leading the company's rapid growth and success. Margie now heads the firm's unique Office of the Future, a think tank charged with shaping the future of both the training industry and her company. Margie received her bachelor and master's degrees from Cornell University and her doctorate from the University of Massachusetts, Amherst. Marjorie Blanchard, significant lessons we have learned from loss.
Okay. Do you have a mic?
It's permanently affixed.
Oh, okay, that's great. I don't know if I'm going to need it, but might. Yeah. Okay. Well, I've been talking about for a couple of years about what I might want to talk about, and this whole idea of talking about loss seems very appropriate right now with so many people dealing with change. Ken and I come up here every summer and we look at what's changed since last summer. And I've been coming since I was 6 years old, and we mourn every little loss. Every tree that goes down, every antique shop that closes. But there have been a lot of changes this year. And so I'm going to talk about change and some of the lessons that we learned when our house burned in California. But before I start, let me just say that we are great lovers of Skinny Atlas. My parents met at Cornell and actually purchased undeveloped land here when I was 7. And we've been coming every single summer since 1949, which is when they had that big polio epidemic. And, it was safer here than anywhere else. And it was one of the great blessings in my life that my parents figured out how we could spend the summer up here. And it's a place that we just love. We live in California. We also love California, and I'm positive I love California because we get to come back here in the summer and we get our green fix, because we were definitely imprinted with all the green here, and by now in California, even with rain, it's brown. And so, but they did have a huge, we have wildfires every year, and Ken and I have lived there since 1976. And only one other time when we were there was there danger in the city of San Diego. But on October 21st, 1,500 homes were lost in San Diego, and in the space of about 3 days. And it was my brother, who lived in Florida for a long time, said it was like a fire hurricane, that the fires generated their own energy, and really the fire departments and the military were very busy saving hospitals and evacuating people, and they were not at all able to save homes. And so in our little neighborhood, about 70 homes were lost, and in our church alone there were 51 homes that were lost. So it was a big deal. It was a really big deal. So when I thought about today, I thought about Bud mentioned I've been in the Office of the Future, which is dealing with what's going to happen in our industry in the future. And I used to really think I liked change. I honestly did. Being in the Office of the Future, you're looking ahead and everything. But then one day I sat down and I said, I've been married to the same person for 55 years. We've been coming to Skinny Atlas every year since I was 7. I walk with the same group of women at home, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and I've walked with them over the same path for about 35 years. And so I started thinking, maybe I really don't like change. Or maybe what I like is change that I can control. But what I don't like is change that I can't control. And so that got me thinking a lot about the fire, because the fire was definitely something that I couldn't control, and it was definitely something that I didn't like. We were out of town at the time of the fire. The only things that we saved were the things in our suitcases. things at the dry cleaner, thank God, and a few things in our storage container. But, you know, it was, when we got home, the house looked like it had been cremated. And so I do have some pictures, and I'll pass it around, and you can see kind of what it looked like when we got back. But it reminded me of my mother. When I was growing up, my dad worked for the Wilson Meatpacking Company, and he was working his way up through the meatpacking company. And the way that you got promoted if you were in that industry was to move to a larger plant, and then a larger plant, and a larger plant. And so we moved about probably every 3 years at least. And I didn't like that either. I mean, I didn't like moving when I had friends, and I didn't like going to a new school because I was shy. And I really didn't like leaving a boyfriend when I was a junior in high school. So I definitely didn't like that. But you know, I thought about my mother. And you know, if she worried about me and thought that I was going to be forever scarred because of this change that was going on, she certainly never let me know that. And I believe if I had thought she was worried about me, I would have worried about myself. But because she had confidence that I was going to get over it, Mother's solution, honestly, to our moving was to get me a new library card. That was her, get Margie a new library card and she'll be fine. And you know, that was resilience training. And I think about that, and I often think about Mother and think how wise she was in a way, but also I'm grateful that I didn't have to worry about myself through all this change. So it was interesting. There were so many learnings that came out of the fire, which is why I was interested in talking about it. But one of the first things I noticed is that people would come up to me and they would say, you know, I'm so sorry for your tragedy. And I thought of the word tragedy, and it just didn't resonate with me. We had a friend, very good friend, who had been killed by a woman, a nurse, coming off the second shift. He was on his motorcycle going to his grandson's baseball game. And he was struck and killed. That, to me, was a tragedy. That was a life-altering thing for certainly his wife. And so I started thinking, what were words about this fire? And one word was sad. I was sad. It was very inconvenient, very, very inconvenient. And there was a lot of sense of loss, but it wasn't a tragedy. And so what I'm talking about tonight, I think, you know, I would like to say there are a lot of losses in people's lives that are many, much more serious than this fire, and even more serious than even some of the things that we're dealing with in our cottages right now. You know, we'll probably recover for some of those, but there was no loss of life, at least that I'm not aware of. So anyway, it was important for me to name it, to name what was happening, so that I could deal with it in a way that was useful for me. So there were certain things that I did, though, that I think back on, and dealing with those feelings that I had. One of them, I just needed to cry. We have a beach house that we share over near the ocean, and before we could move into a rental, I used to walk around Encinitas, and I noticed that I could cry more when I was moving. When my body was engaged, I could feel more of the feelings that I needed to feel when my body was moving. And I know there's the whole psychological field around a bat and a pillow and all the other things that go with that in order to get your feelings out. And I certainly experienced that I could really feel those losses much more when I was moving than when I was sitting still. And I thought that was interesting. I thought that was helpful to me because, as I say, I needed to cry. There were a lot of precious things. We had lived in our house for 25 years, and it was a happy house with a lot of wonderful memories, and so I needed to cry. Ken and I had a memorial service for our house. We We have an office about 15 minutes from our house, and about 100 people came. And it was like a good funeral, frankly. People told stories. They told stories about parties that we had had, or they told stories about times when they had lived with us. I had forgotten how many people had lived with us as they had relocated to San Diego, and sometimes really because of having to, build a new life there. There were laughs, there were, some tears. We drank champagne to the house. It was a proper ending. It was a proper ending to what had been a wonderful house. And again, it was a way that we could move towards the feelings rather than just stuff them. And also share some of the feelings that we had with other people. We also have very good friends, the Arbelizes, and they had lost their home to fire. They had lived across the street from us, and their house had burned down. And we went away with them for the weekend, and we unloaded on them. I mean, did we ever unload on them? Everything that I could think of that I was going to miss and everything, we just talked about. And they were so generous. They were so generous because they knew what we were going through, and they had gone through it before, and you didn't have to explain it to them. They hurt right along with us because they had also been part of that happy house. And so I think about those three things that we did to deal with those feelings of loss and sadness and even inconvenience. And I think it helped us, at least initially, to deal with this kind of trauma. I was amazed at how many people reached out to us to help us. It was very uncomfortable. Ken and I are much more comfortable being the helper than the helpee. It just didn't feel very good. The church assigned a family to us, and they were bringing us things, and people sent back Christmas cards. They must have gone through albums and sent back Christmas cards for 30 years. Karen Woodworth, who has a cottage next to us, somebody went on the internet and got a copy of Ken's father's 1924 Annapolis yearbook and sent it to Ken. It was remarkable. It was really remarkable. And as I said, finally, Ken and I just said, we've just got to get to be good receivers. We've just got to just relax and let that all happen and just take it in and let people help us. And the other thing that happened was we actually were in a state of shock. I remember I got home we were both in Florida at different places when the fire happened. And so we did have our suitcases, but I went shopping with my daughter Debbie about 3 or 4 days after we got home. I couldn't think what to buy. I honestly couldn't make a decision. Debbie rented a house for us. My brother bought cars for us because they had burned up. Scott and Madeline hosted Thanksgiving that year, which we typically do. And what it taught me was when somebody goes through a big change like that and you ask, how can I help? They honestly don't know. They really don't know. They're in a state of shock. And what you need to do probably, and I've learned now, is just to do something. Something that, will make you feel like you're adding to whatever their situation is, but not to expect a call from them because they're too confused. They're really, really confused and shouldn't probably be making any big decisions during that period of time. So I learned that on the other side of it, and I'm hopeful that it's made me a better, much more conscious of people going through big shocks and what to do with them. The other thing, though, is I really realized how fortunate we were. There had been a fire come through San Diego in 2004, surprisingly, went through a neighborhood, and so we reinsured our house. And many of the saddest people and the ones who still haven't rebuilt were ones that were woefully uninsured or less insured than they needed to be. We did hire a public adjuster because public adjusters know about insurance. And I don't even want to get to be an expert on insurance. I mean, I don't want to know. And they took 6% of what we got, and it was well worth it because they understood what things cost and what it would cost to rebuild and all the other things. And so, but we were very fortunate. Nobody was killed. San Diego was magnificent. There was no looting. There were so many people trying to help at the Qualcomm Stadium. They had to send doctors home. I mean, people just were better than the best. And it was an amazing outpouring of concern. Our church started having weekly meetings for the families that were impacted, and they would bring the insurance companies in to be able to work with people. So people really did rally around and made lemonade out of big lemons. But I was so conscious of feeling fortunate for a couple reasons. One is that we had an office, and so an awful lot of my stuff was at our office. And I also have a bookkeeper, and a lot of my stuff was at her place. And then we have Skinny Alice, and a lot of stuff is up here. So it wasn't all in one little place. I knew we had pictures up here. I knew that there were things that, it wasn't just all in one place, and I just felt so fortunate for that. But the big lesson there was to be helpable, to let people help, and to know that you need that. Time helps a lot. It's now, this will be in the fall, it'll be our 10-year anniversary of the fire. And time really helps a lot in terms of what I call, this was a middle of the road sort of severity fire. Our daughter, at the end of our memorial service, she stood up, and she's got a wicked sense of humor, and she said, I have mixed feelings about this fire. She said, I would go into my parents' garage and I'd look in the closets and I'd look around, and when something happens to them, Scott's not going to help me. It's all going to be on me. She said, no, I don't have to do that. And it was almost sacrilegious. I mean, frankly, almost sacrilegious, but so true. I mean, we had 5,500 books. Nobody needs 5,500 books. And a lot of them were big, beautiful coffee table books. And I probably had 200 guitar books, and Ken has every golf book made for person. And, we just had so much, and what's happened is our lives have lightened. I mean, really lightened. And I don't know if you've been reading this book about this tidying up lady, and how she gets people throwing everything away. We don't have as much to throw away because it burned, and I can see the power in that. You only use about 20% of what's in your house anyway. And so the other 80% is just sitting there, and some of it is crap. I mean, we have a closet full of Debbie's clothes, and we actually had a party at our company, an 80s party. People went shopping for what they were going to wear in that closet because of Debbie's clothes that were there. So believe me, we had a lot of crap. And so our lives did lighten. We got resettled in a place in our neighborhood, a rental. And after a few months, I started asking myself, what's good about this? Or what are the lessons learned? And the minute you ask that question, you actually get answers. You start to get answers. Even if you could say, what could be good about this, if you weren't really there yet. And so there were several things that were good about it, or that were lessons for it. One of the things I did that year was I engaged in what I call radical self-care. Now, radical self-care is a coaching term, and what it really means is that you're going to take care of yourself. And so that year, I stopped dieting. It was lovely. Absolutely lovely. I probably gained 3 or 4 pounds, but it was lovely. I also didn't take on extra things. When I would have the opportunity to do that, I would say to myself, this isn't the year for this. That we have enough dealing with whatever is going on, and this isn't the year. So I really watched what I was doing because I I like getting involved in things, but that was not the year. You know, you can learn from the losses that other people have. We have a very good friend. Her name is Natasha Josefowicz. And Natasha is a poet. And she's Russian. And she's very gifted at looking at what situations are in her life when she became a grandmother, when she became a mother. And in one case, when she became a widow. And Ken and I we had dinner with her probably about 8 months after the fire. And Natasha had been a widow for about 2 years. And we had a wonderful time. She's just a great gal, and we were laughing, and we just loved her husband and everything. And at one point she said, you know, this is such fun. She said, but I'm going to go downstairs. She lives in a home for a retirement home. I'm going to go downstairs tomorrow, and even if I tell somebody about what tonight was about, nobody's really going to understand it because they don't know you, they don't know, you know, our relationship. She said, when Herman died, I lost the witness to my life. I lost the person who knew what my life was about. And you know, that was such an interesting thing to think about, you know, just being able to sit at her feet and kind of pre-learn something that we're probably going to be impacted by at some point. But just that word, the witness to my life, was just so meaningful to me. And so we can, I think, learn from other people's experiences of loss and how they're dealing with it. She wrote a book poetry called How to Live Without the Person You Can't Live Without. And it really chronicled her journey from when Herman died through the next year to when she was finally becoming you know, comfortable being a widow. And so it was quite an evening that we had. One of the things that I noticed at the beginning, when you're dealing with loss and you're thinking about things, it's painful. It's like memories, they hurt. But after a while, I noticed that I would think of 3 or 4 things every day, and it was like everything was just a little pinprick. Ouch, you know, I don't have that anymore. Or, ouch, I don't do that. And it was these pinpricks, and I finally realized that there were less this month than there were last month, and the next month there were even fewer. But I also realized that you can deal with pinpricks if they come kind of, you know, not all at once, and it's that first shock that makes it so difficult. And so that was one thing I learned, is about pinpricks. Not too long ago, probably 2 years ago, Ken asked me where his graduation robe was. When I was a young faculty wife, we had a club and we made beautiful faculty robes with, you know, blue chevrons, red. I mean, it was gorgeous. It was the first time in 8 years Ken had asked for it. But I thought, oh, ouch, that went with the fire, you know. And it was, again, another pinprick, even that much later. So one of the most interesting things to me was I became aware that everything that I had ever given away, I still had access to, and everything I had kept and clung to perished. And probably the best example of that was when our children turned 40. I did a wonderful thing. I did a book for them, a big 12 by 12 scrapbook of all their pictures from that time to 40. 10 pages for every decade. All their Olin Mills pictures, all their school pictures, everything up to the time that they turned 40. And it was a labor of love. I mean, believe me, it was a labor of love. But the most wonderful thing is that that scrapbook was in their house. It wasn't in my house. And both of the children had scrapbooks in their house. Now I can go and look at that scrapbook, I can take it to Staples and I can copy it, but And I gave Debbie some heirlooms that Ken's mother gave to us, and I'm so grateful for that. If I thought of a recipe that I'd shared with somebody, I could call them and I could get the recipe back from them. Just this idea that what you get rid of, you have access to, is very profound. And I'm still trying to deal with that, to tell you the truth, as we're, thinking about downsizing and all the rest of it. But it's an amazing, and I think we know it with love. I think we know it with caring. But in this case, it was even things, and they lived on because we weren't holding tight to them. So when I think about that whole experience, I think about the lessons. I think about the lessons of naming it for what it was, the confidence that you're going to be all right, that you need to move towards your feelings and not stuff them. And you may even have to do some things, like have a funeral or a thing or a cottage or a piece of a cottage. We just lost an elevator. We haven't had our funeral for the elevator yet, but we should have the funeral because it was painful.
As long as it doesn't take you down.
That's right.
What about Ancestor Day?
Right, we'll do that. I think another big lesson is realizing people don't know what they need, and you don't even know enough to ask for it, to tell you the truth. And that time helps, learning from others, give stuff away, expect pinpricks. And then I think just one thing that I really have become much more just grateful for the few things that we managed to salvage. We've had stuff in some of Ken's father's medals were in storage, and just things that would have been, when my mother passed away, which about 4 months later, going through her house was a treasure hunt because of pictures that I had given to her. We still do send out a letter. And my mother wasn't particularly organized, but a letter with every Christmas card, and every time we found that letter, we'd go, yes! And I think we got all letters except for maybe 3 years, but they'd be in between the recipes, they would not be organized, but it made me very appreciative of that. And then I want to end with one last thing. I've been talking about change that happens to you that maybe you don't like, or that it's not very welcome. But there are lots of times when we're considering engineering change for ourselves. When I was, let's see, what year was it? 1997. I had been president of our company for about 11 years, and we had grown from 6 million to 30 million, and I was tired. I would come up to the lake, and I wouldn't even answer a call for 2 weeks just to. And I remember hearing myself say to somebody, I'm just so tired of learning things. And that's just not me. I mean, I am a lifelong learner, and so I thought, I've got to do something different. But I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so one day I sat down and I wrote myself a resignation letter. Nobody knew I did it. I wrote, I wanted to still work in the company and do something meaningful, but at a much less intense level. I wanted my office. I wanted my secretary. I put pretty much what I wanted, but I just didn't know what I was going to do. And I didn't tell Ken about it. I didn't tell anybody, really. And I put it in the drawer. And for a month, I mourned. I would go to leadership team meetings, and I'd be sad the whole time because I would know that I wasn't going to be there. And I loved my job. I was just tired of it. And gradually, after about a month, I figured out what I was going to do, which was to start this Office of the Future and have a little team around me and everything, and told everybody that I was going to, change my position, resign my position. Of course, some of them didn't think that was a great idea, but I was finished with it. I mean, I was done. And what I realized later was that I had created a vacuum. And I had been so busy before that it would have been hard for any creative ideas to come in. If you're just running like mad and you don't create a vacuum, then it's very hard to even think what could be, and really new opportunities did come in. So if you are in that place where you're thinking of engineering some kind of change for yourself, you know, you might write yourself a letter and slip it somewhere and maybe have the sad feelings that go with a change of something that you've liked, but then be open to maybe some new ideas as they come in, because it was certainly helpful to me, and I at least really got a lot out of it and wound up in a good place. So I wanted to end at least with something, you know, if you're planning it instead of it's just happening to you. So that's all I have to say, but I would love to answer any questions that anybody has.
So when you finally got to the point where you felt like you could rebuild,
Yeah.
How did you change your kitchen? I mean, you know, did you get all those things you used to want, or
You
did
know,
you go back to the
what
same
we-
things you had?
Yeah, we had just finished doing that with our house. I mean, we had made our house into what we wanted. I actually have some pictures. I'll pass them around. There are 9 pictures of our first house, and then the fire, and then the picture of our second house. We were going to rebuild. We loved the neighborhood, and we got plans and an architect and everything, but we got a neighbor. We had a neighbor who had been a problem in the past, and he held up our plans for 4.5 months. And we were getting finished with our rental and the insurance paying for that. And all of a sudden, a house came up for sale right next to where we were renting. Our daughter-in-law spotted it on a walk through the neighborhood, and we ran out and grabbed all the signs and bought it. And you know, we got it for more money than it would have cost to rebuild, I believe. But more than that, it's a wonderful house. And so we were spared neither one of us needed to build a house at this point. And so we love the house. It's actually a great house. And so that had a very happy ending part of it, and that was good. So, but other people who lost their homes, everybody in our neighborhood built at least a 10 to 20% larger house. And you know, I'm sure they have gotten whatever they considered was important. So just about everybody's built a larger house. So it's actually, one nice thing about it is we were a pretty staid neighborhood. Our house was 25 years old. The houses on both sides of us burned, but now there are a lot of new houses in the neighborhood, and so it's not an old neighborhood anymore. It's kind of an old new neighborhood, and in that way I think it's been a blessing to the neighborhood. So.
Is there anything that burned that you really wish you still had?
You know, the things that I miss the most, I would never have thought to grab. I had 3 pair of really comfortable dress shoes. And you know, you have to buy 20 pairs of shoes to be able to walk around all day. Never would I have gone and done that. My computer burned, and it had 22,000 pictures in it, backed up by 2 hard drives sitting right next to it. And that was the saddest thing, and that was before the cloud and all the rest of it. But just in that whole idea of giving things away, we had come back from a trip, an amazing trip to India, and I had gone through my photos and selected the 100 that I thought were the most exciting, and done a slideshow for the office, and the DVD was at the office. That otherwise I wouldn't have even one picture left, because those are the most recent ones there. So those pictures in my computer I really miss, and now I'm very conscientious about having them backed up and everything. But that I would have grabbed. I would have grabbed that probably on my way out. We did have a close call one time, and we had 2 hours to get ready, and we had several neighbors, and we're all putting stuff in people's cars, and we're walking out, and Debbie's saying, "I never liked that lamp anyway." And back in the house it goes. I mean, it was kind of like, oh my. So as I say, we're very fortunate, because so many of the things, anybody that had a safe in their home, all the papers in it were destroyed. I never went back and sifted through all the stuff. Because what happens in California is the house burns, and then the tile roof falls down on top of it. And so we did have some people out there kind of sifting through, seeing if they could find silver and all that kind of thing, but it's a job. And so I don't know, especially when the whole house just collapses. It's not healthy either to be in there, you know, with all that crap. So yes.
I particularly liked your comment about not liking being a helpee. It's always much more fun to help other people than to have to feel that other people are having to help you.
I know.
I can remember as a young boy my grandmother saying to me, "David, when are you going to learn to accept things gracefully?"
Yeah, right.
And I don't think I ever really did.
No. It's very awkward. It's very, very awkward, and yet, you know, you think that's exactly what people wanted to. I was just amazed at some of the creative things that people did do. One of the most creative gifts that someone gave us was one of those boxes of greeting cards from Costco that has birthday and sympathy and all those cards, because all those things are gone. You know, and yet you're having to write thank you notes and things like that. It was just interesting to think, you know, what would you even give to somebody that would be of use to them at a time like that? Really very interesting.
People were amazing to think of things like I interviewed Coach John Wooden at a luncheon, leadership luncheon, and he signed a basketball for me. And after the fire, his assistant called and said, "Coach heard about the fire and wondered if you were part of that." And yeah, he said, "Was his ball in there?" Yeah, he said, "Well, the other one's coming down tomorrow." You know, he was 96 years old and just an amazing guy. And then I had a ball signed by Y.A. Tittle, a great Giant quarterback. And his assistant said, "You know, was Y.A.'s ball?" "Yeah." "Well, we got another one coming." You know, just the things.
And Shula's, Ken's a collector of sports memorabilia. So we had a lot of things that will never be seen, you know, so. Any other questions? What I hope is that as you think about some of the losses that your neighbors and you were going through just this last week, that, you know, if there's just one thing that I mentioned that makes it helpful for you to either move towards some of the feelings or, you know, help people in ways that maybe they can't even think that would make me feel good. But it was, I actually have to say now, 10 years later, I think there were more blessings in the fire, just because of that. It's so hard for us to get rid of things. And so anyway.
What about the ancestors? Is that the cemetery?
Oh, we're trying to start a new tradition or a new ritual. I'm a big one for rituals in our family, and so I heard about a woman who came and visited us last summer, and she said, "Well, we had breakfast with the ancestors yesterday." And I said, "Really? What was that?" And she said, "Well, we all went out to the cemetery and we had breakfast, and we talked about the ancestors that were buried there." And so I told our family, there were about 15 people there, that I wanted to have breakfast at the Scott Cemetery. And they, you know, one grandson said, "That is gross," and another one, but anyway, because I had a casserole and because I had something really, fruit and coffee cake, and just because they're good people, they all came. And at the very last minute, I pulled down some pictures I have on the refrigerator of all our dogs that have died over the years. And we had the best time talking about my mom and dad and how they had they bought undeveloped land here and developed it, and just what a gift it's been to our family. And then my daughter-in-law started talking about her mother, and it just went on and on. It was really great. And the grandchildren, they talked a lot about the dogs and about, you know, what one dog got them through college, and it was just one of the loveliest things. And I thought, and I'm hoping that this year we'll do the same thing. But I think that as families, we need to celebrate families and be glad that we're part of them. So.
We asked Marge's mom and dad, if my sister died, my mom didn't know where to put her, and so we asked Margie's mom and dad, where'd I be buried? She said, at the end of the lake, that little cemetery down there. And so we bought 2 plots, Margie's dad had done, we got, and him and my sister, and we had one for Margie's mother, and then we got a plot for each of us. We've taken our picture lying down in front of her. You know, Marjorie Blanchard, you know, dash, you know, 1940 dash. And now we bought some more plots down there, and so some other friends said, yeah, that'd be a nice place to be. So people would come out of the summer, you go
Yep.
down once in a while. And,
Scott had a near accident when he lived in somebody rear-ended him. And it really shocked him, and he calls us at 1 o'clock. Mom, I'm fine, the car did just what it was. How many plots do you have in that cemetery? Anyway, thank you very much.